Go to Lanhee Chen, a Hoover Fellow and former policy director for the Mitt Romney campaign. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Lanhee. What can you tell us is the message that Mike Pence was trying to send there? I mean, what a scene that was, to see him sitting so close in proximity to Kim Jong-un's sister.
An amazing scene, Sandra, but really I think the vice president should be congratulated here because he's staying exactly on message, which is that American policymakers cannot take their eye off the ball. North Korea remains a serious threat. There remain serious tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and while this sports diplomacy is great, everyone loves to see a friendly sort of relationship between the two sides. Let's not forget the fact that once these Olympic Games are over, we will return to a state of heightened tension. And so the vice president was merely presenting the American point of view here, which is that until North Korea abandons its ambitions to have a nuclear weapon that can reach the American homeland, there is no reason to engage them in friendly conversation.
And of course, we know that Otto Warmbier's father, Fred, was a guest of the vice president while he was traveling there at the opening ceremonies. Here is Mike Pence talking about that meeting.
Fred Warmbier and his family have told the story of their wonderful son, Otto Warmbier, who was imprisoned in North Korea and released in such a condition that by the time he made it home, he would pass away. Fred is now a great champion for the North from which you fled and the freedom of the people there, and it's an honor.
Thank you.
To be with you today.
Thank you.
Obviously, a very powerful moment, Lanhee.
Indeed, a very powerful moment, and it's a reminder of just how repressive this North Korean regime is. The human rights violations are committed against not their own citizens, but also potentially folks who are captured, like Otto Warmbier. So this is a story that we shouldn't forget. And again, it comes back to the fundamental point, Sandra. We cannot deviate from the fact that North Korea remains a threat, that all of this pageantry is great. But at the end of the day, this might just be one large distraction. So we should not be naive about these interactions. And I think the vice president's conveying exactly the right message.
Here's Raj Shah speaking on behalf of the White House strategy on North Korea yesterday. Listen.
Our strategy with respect to North Korea is denuclearization. It's to provide as much economic and political pressure on that regime so that it would end its nuclear program. And we've had a considerable amount of success over the last year pursuing that strategy. We've had dozens of countries reduce economic or diplomatic ties with North Korea.
Are we doing the right things, Lanhee?
I think we are. I think we're ratcheting up pressure with economic sanctions. I think we're doing the right things to talk to friends and, frankly, adversaries in the region. I'm thinking specifically of what's happening with China. They have maximum leverage over the North Koreans. We've got to do our best to convince the Chinese to be a constructive part of the dialogue, and I think the Trump administration has done a good job with that. But we really have to continue that pressure. We have to continue to ratchet up those sanctions and at the same time really bolster our military and the deterrent effect potentially of our military in South Korea and in the Asian theater generally.
Do you think that Kim Jong-un is getting the message?
I think he's getting the message, but I don't think the message can be repeated loudly or frequently enough, Sandra. I think we've got to make sure that the North Korean regime understands that under no circumstances is it acceptable for them to have a nuclear weapon that can target and potentially hit cities in the American homeland. That is simply not acceptable. And their dialogue, their rhetoric, and indeed their actions have been unacceptable so far. And I think, again, the vice president is conveying precisely the right thing. And if indeed that snub yesterday of the North Koreans was mutual or formal or indeed planned, I think that's a good thing, because how do you expect him to communicate with people against whom we're sanctioning and whom we don't agree with on these matters of policy?
All right. All meanwhile, those Winter Olympics are well underway in South Korea. Lanhee Chen, thank you for joining us this afternoon.